Getting too much spam and want to be able to better protect your personal data? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, let me ask you something. How attached are you to your car? Do you really need it? Because you may have to sell it if you want to be able to afford the recently revealed PS5 Pro. Oh boy. Okay, for a while now, the PS5 Pro has been one of the worst kept secrets in video games. Not only could we logically assume that it'd be arriving around this time, given the timing of the PS4 Pro launch, but word of it began to leak as far back as 2 years ago. Last year, the chatter firmed up for a 2024 release date, and just last month at Gamescom, developers were freely speaking, off the record of course, about the imminent arrival of PlayStation's next hardware drop. Mark Cerny, the high-tech priest of PlayStation, was front and center for the PS5 Pro's reveal, just as he's been in reveals past. It began with a look back at just how much innovation the base PS5 had brought to bear, and to be honest, it was a convincing reminder of the fact that the PS5 is a pretty great console, delivering not only strong performance, but lightning-fast load times, great 3D audio, ray tracing, and the DualSense controller, the value of which is often questionable, but undeniable in the case of something like Astro Bot. It was so convincing a recap that it made the next part of the presentation particularly tricky, because it was here that Sony had to convince everyone that the PS5 Pro would deliver an experience over and above what the base model was already providing, and I'm not sure he really did that. He introduced what he called the Big Three, the three improvements that made the Pro model the Pro model. The first is a more powerful GPU, which he claims delivers 45% more throughput. There's also been improvements made to the ray tracing tech, which should make it easier for developers to implement ray tracing without being limited by hardware capability. And finally, he introduced PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR. This is AI upscaling akin to Nvidia's DLSS or AMD's FSR. This is, in my view, the single most important upgrade that the PS5 Pro is offering, because AI upscaling will often double your frame rate on PC, and there's no reason to suspect it would be much different here on PlayStation. Indeed, that was a pretty core part of Sony's overall PS5 Pro pitch. He said that with the Pro, you won't have to choose between fidelity and performance mode anymore. You'll be able to get high fidelity visuals at 60 FPS. He then showed some examples of what games running on the PS5 Pro looked like, comparing them to what they were like on the base model. Here's an example. Can you spot the difference? Because I can't. They showed like 4 more of these examples, and I swear to God, you need like a Hubble telescope so you can zoom in enough to spot the difference. And that is really the challenge at the heart of trying to pitch the PS5 Pro. Visuals have gotten to the point where each new generation and each new hardware increment delivers diminishing returns. Look at what's happening right now with phones or the iPad. Every new generation is slightly better than the last, but we'll never again experience what it was like going from an old school Nokia to an iPhone, or from a SNES to a PS1. I will say this though, I think the inclusion of AI upscaling in the PS5 Pro is a very big deal, and it should notably and very regularly result in substantially better frame rates than what we see on the base model, with less visual degradation, since the dynamic resolution scaling utilized in performance modes can often result in a very blurry or grainy image. So that's the hardware. Let's talk about the price. Okay, the PS5 Pro will launch on November 7th. Pre-orders open on September 26th. It will cost an eye-watering $699 US, 699 pounds sterling, 799 euro, and 119,980 yen. At the time of writing, the Australian price has yet to be confirmed, but based on currency conversion, I expect it to be somewhere in the vicinity of $4.2 million dues. Important to note that all of these prices do not include a disk drive, which needs to be purchased separately. And nor does it include the vertical stand. You're charging me $4.2 million dues and you couldn't even include a stand? Come on, Sony. So a lot to say about these price points. First of all, $699 US is a lot of money. The PS4 Pro launched in 2016 at $399. If we adjust for inflation, had the PS4 Pro been released today, it would have cost $522, roughly $180 less than what Sony is asking for the PS5 Pro, and that had a disc drive. Then we get to the question of that UK pricing. If you did a straight dollar conversion of £699 sterling to US dollars, you would get $914. Like, what the hell? Even if you add taxes of 20%, you still get well shy of $914, and you still don't have a disc drive. So, what the hell, man? Why is Sony doing this? Well, one theory is that they're doing it because they can. The Sony vs Xbox console war is over. Many people aren't willing to recognize that fact yet, but it's true. Sony have bested Microsoft once and for all when it comes to the console business, which is why the PS5 is outselling the Xbox 5-1. With that kind of market dominance comes the ability to set the price, and it's reasonable to assume that Sony are pricing with the sort of confidence that comes from being number one. The other, and I think far more likely theory, is that this price point reflects the AI bubble we are currently in, where the cost of silicon is astronomically high as every tech company looks to incorporate AI into everything they do. Sony is competing with Apple and Meta and Google when bidding for the components that power the PS5, and that is naturally going to lead to a higher price point. I'll tell you this though, I don't believe that Sony are pricing the PS5 Pro this way so as to skim huge amounts of cream off the top. Sony may have won the console war, but they are still in an existential battle to keep the console business alive. PCs, mobile, streaming tech, hell, even Microsoft's own cross-platform strategy, it's all eroding the traditional console business model, and Sony does not have the luxury of price gouging on their hardware when they're facing these sorts of external pressures. As for what this means for we as consumers, look, everyone's gonna make up their own mind about this stuff. You can get a pre-owned PS4 for like $50 off Facebook Marketplace and still enjoy like 90% of what Videogames has to offer. You can buy a brand new Switch Lite for $170, a Steam Deck for $399, a PS5 for $499, or you can get into the crazy world of PC gaming where the sky is the absolute limit. Alternatively, you could use cloud streaming tech like Xbox's xCloud or Nvidia's GeForce Now, which yeah, they have a monthly fee, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than forking out for the upfront hardware. The point is, everyone has their own budgets and their own tolerances for this stuff. For enthusiasts who love their PlayStations and can never see themselves walking away from that ecosystem, the PS5 Pro is likely to offer you some nice improvements, albeit at a very hefty price tag. For everybody else, the PS5 Pro's price point is likely to get you thinking about alternative ways to play your video games. And the good news is that in 2024, there are a lot of other options which are a hell of a lot more cost effective than this. Okay, so that's the PS5 Pro stuff, but there was actually more Sony news this week relating to one of their biggest and riskiest purchases ever, Bungie. Just this week, Bungie have finally emerged from their long spell of silence following the recent job cuts at the studio, as well as reporting that they'll be abandoning their annual expansion release cadence, which has defined Destiny since its inception. As part of the info dump, they provided multiple blog post updates on their vision for the future of the game, and the updates were certainly updates. And look, this is probably a good time to respond to all the "where's the final shape" review stuff. Fair enough. The honest truth is that the news about what happened at Bungie and the rumors about the likely future of the game, it really bummed me out, like quite a bit, to the point where I actually haven't logged into Destiny since that time. It felt sad for the final shape to have achieved such highs and for it to ultimately mean very little for the future of the game. The final shape was a really brilliant expansion, and it should have been a moment that gave people so much optimism for the future. Because you looked at that expansion and you said, damn, Bungie can still cook. You thought, okay, this team has still got it. But the reality is that big chunks of that team aren't there anymore. Hell, the studio is almost 50% smaller than it was less than 12 months ago. That number doesn't suggest that Destiny's best days lay ahead of it. And I think for these sorts of games, the promise of the future is just as important as the here and now, because these games are asking you to make a long-term investment in them, and with so much uncertainty about the future, you feel less enthused to make that investment. This week, Bungie began the process of trying to provide a little more certainty about what does come next. Unsurprisingly, they've recommitted themselves to the franchise, but they say they want their approach to parts of it to change. Firstly, they clarified what was earlier leaked. Bungie will no longer do the big annual expansions that deliver the meaty linear campaign experiences. Instead, Bungie will do 2 major content drops each year that they call expansions, but I don't know, that nomenclature feels a little cheeky to me. The expansions will deliver new story beats, locations, missions, gear, dungeons, and raids, just like we're used to, but like I said, no campaign experience. In addition to that, the game is going back to the quarterly seasonal model that Bungie said they were moving on from when they implemented Acts. The difference with these new seasons, though, is that they won't be advancing Destiny's story and will instead focus on new activities and rewards. Bungie also committed to simplifying aspects of the game, acknowledging that something as simple as navigating its activities directory has become so complicated that it's necessitated an entire overhaul. They've also said they're adding new difficulty selection tools that provide a deeper challenge but also more compelling rewards. If you're wondering how the Destiny community is feeling about all this, I'd say they're feeling thoroughly whelmed. It was a very mechanically focused vision of the future, spending an inordinate amount of time talking about how things like menus and loot rarities would be reworked without providing very much actual, vision. Bungie promises a new saga will soon begin, delivered through new non-linear storytelling, but outside of a few pieces of key art, we really don't have too much to go on there. It's hard for Bungie to give us much more than that at this point, though. Bungie are doing the best they can with the hand they've been dealt. I'm not really feeling Destiny right now, and I am taking a break from it, but I still do love this franchise, and I value Bungie as a studio, and I'm cheering for them to be able to make lemonade out of the lemons that they've been handed by Bungie's senior leadership. The challenge with modern day game making, though, is that it's costly and it takes time, so we're going to have to wait to see how Bungie's vision of the future actually manifests. I will say, though, that it does appear to be a more limited, more scoped back, and less ambitious view of the future than one we might have imagined just a few short months ago. And after 10 years of ups and downs, it would have been nice to have left this feeling of uncertainty long behind us. One part of Destiny's future that feels like an absolute certainty, though, is mobile. We knew this was likely a couple of years ago when Bungie signed a massive $100 million deal with NetEase, after which time Bungie began advertising for people with mobile development experience. We hadn't heard anything about it since then, but it is possible that whatever project was in the works was canned during Bungie's recent downsizing, since a number of incubation projects were also canned then. The mobile thing seems to have survived, however. Twitter user Kurakasis said, quote, "Destiny Rising is the title of an unannounced Destiny mobile game being developed by NetEase and Bungie. It has not been cancelled," end quote. That was actually reposted by Jeff Grubb over on Threads. Shout out to Threads, by the way. Come and find me over there. He said, quote, "Yes, this is real. Not a lot of people from Bungie working on it. It could get announced soon. It's going to be Destiny on mobile, but with a lot of changes. Hero characters instead of building your own character, for example," end quote. I really do shudder to imagine what the in-game shop is going to look like for this one, given the last time NetEase partnered with a big developer on a major IP, we got Diablo Immortal. Once bitten, twice shy, and all that. A quick lightning round to finish off. The iPhone 16 has just been announced, and it's the same as the last one, only now it's got a new hat. That's a lie, it doesn't. But it does have a new button that does camera things, plus its supercharged chip means that it's capable of playing AAA games like Death Stranding, Resident Evil 4 Remake, and Assassin's Creed Shadows, which has just been announced as a day one new release for iOS devices. If Shadows is anywhere near the same length as Valhalla, let's hope the iPhone 16 delivers enough battery to power a small country, or a single playthrough of Valhalla, either one. Rumors abound that GTA 6 has been delayed into 2026, but right now there's nothing firm behind those rumors, with Jason Schreier himself reporting that Rockstar staff are currently of the understanding that the game will launch in 2025 as planned. Meanwhile, Rockstar is finalizing the music going into the game, and one of the approaches that was made wasn't particularly well received. They hit up a band called Heaven 17 and asked them if they could include their song Temptation. Band member Martin Ware didn't hold back when he shared his thoughts about the offer on Twitter. Quote, "It was $7,500 for a buyout of any future royalties from the game forever. To put this in context, Grand Theft Auto 6, he meant 5, grossed, wait for it, $8.6 billion. But think of the exposure. Go fuck yourself," end quote. Absolutely based. Genuinely astounding that Rockstar are offering these sorts of paltry sums to musicians, given the insane money printing machine they are about to put into operation. The PS5 Pro is imminent, and after that, the next major console release we'll likely see is the Intellivision Amico. Tommy Tallarico's mother is going to be so proud. No, that's never going to happen. But the Switch 2 is coming, and a reliable Nintendo leaker, Nate the Hate, is reporting with a fair amount of confidence that the new console will support backwards compatibility. Not exactly clear if this will be for cartridges and digital, or perhaps just digital, but hey, nice to know that Nintendo are finally learning the lessons of the past. Now they just need to figure out how they can sell us full-priced $70 remasters of games we already own and can play perfectly on the Switch 2. It's a tall order, but I'm sure Nintendo will figure it out. If that story sounds a little too Captain Obvious for you, then you're going to love this next one. Warner Brothers want to make another Harry Potter game. Their CFO spoke about it during a recent conference event hosted by a bank, and he said, quote, "Obviously, a successor to Hogwarts Legacy is one of the biggest priorities in a couple of years down the road," end quote. Absolutely no surprise, of course, since that game was the highest selling release of 2023, and I haven't even checked yet, but I'd wager it's probably one of the highest selling games of 2024, and yep, I just checked, it is the 11th best selling game of the year so far, so there you go. Our next top story is whatever the fuck this is. Yeah, I really have nothing else to say about this other than I'm sure the Minecraft movie will make more money than the entire MCU combined. Hopoo Games are the studio that originally made Risk of Rain 1 and 2, but they sold the IP to Gearbox to manage it. Gearbox have royally fucked it up, but that is honestly a story for another day. Hopoo Games have now been absorbed into Valve. Hopoo were working on their own unannounced project called Snail, but now they're saying they're joining Valve's ranks to do things unknown. Right now, Valve are maintaining Dota and CSGO and Team Fortress, LMAO, that last one was a joke. They're also in the process of launching Deadlock, a third-person MOBA shooter that's currently in open testing. Hopoo don't strike me as the kind of studio that would be contributing to any of these sorts of projects, so if anything, it's likely this team will be put to work on something else entirely, or maybe even Half-Life 3, which is strongly suspected to be in development right now. Either way, we won't know for sure until they tell us, so I'll be sure to report back if and when they do. A sign of shifting demographics, Chinese language users now outrank English users on Steam. That's a result of, population, but also Black Myth Wukong, which affected a massive surge in Steam uptake in China. How massive, you ask? Well, Black Myth Wukong has now sold through 18 million copies in 2 weeks. That is absolutely absurd. For reference, Hogwarts Legacy, the best-selling game of 2023, sold through 22 million units in a year. Wukong, 18 million in 2 weeks. Analysts estimate that around 85% of those sales were in China, hence the sudden surge in Chinese Steam usage. Like Genshin Impact, I'm pretty sure the Black Myth Wukong marks a turning point in the way that publishers view the Chinese market, and I expect all of them to pour significantly more resources into it in the future. Finally, remember when I was like LMAO when talking about Valve supporting Team Fortress 2? Well, that's because they basically don't, and as a result, the game has suffered from not only a lack of meaningful updates, but also a massive bot problem that has rendered the game all but unplayable for many people. That issue has improved substantially over the last few months, but when it was at its zenith, a petition was circulated that collected nearly 350,000 signatures. That's impressive in and of itself, but what's even more impressive is that the people ringleading the Save Team Fortress 2 campaign actually printed a hardcover, leather-bound book with every single name in it. They took some sick footage of it, because why not? And they plan to hand-deliver it to Valve HQ. Unlikely to really move the needle when it comes to awareness of the issue at Valve, but it is inarguably a very cool-looking book. And gamers have certainly put together worse petitions over the years, so let's hope the TF2 people get exactly what they want and more. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, long ago I feared for all of our collective productivity if Balatro should ever come to mobile, and it appears as though our day of reckoning has come. Balatro developer Local Thunk has announced that Balatro will arrive on iOS and Android devices on September 26th. It'll be a premium game that you purchase from storefronts, and it'll also be available as part of Apple Arcade. Extremely based that a poker-style game will have no in-game ads and no in-game spending. Local Thunk, absolutely the hero we need but do not deserve. Speaking of gambling, Konami. They're trying to get back into the honest-to-goodness video game making business, and this is their latest offering. It's called Deliver at All Costs. It's an isometric destruction delivery racing game set in the 1950s. Absolutely no idea what would have possessed Konami of all publishers to get behind something like this, but you know what? I am 100% about it. This is a weird little game from a debut studio out of Sweden. Pretty awesome that Konami of all publishers are helping to put something like this out. No date for it yet, but it's arriving sometime next year. I'll keep you posted. Harebrained Schemes is a very storied studio indeed. Long ago, they produced the excellent Shadowrun trilogy before also making the excellent Battletech. Their latest release, Lamplighters League, wasn't as strong and certainly didn't sell anywhere near enough to break even, so the studio parted ways with publisher Paradox, and now they're an indie outfit. This is their first release, and it's called Graft. It's a post-cyberpunk survival horror RPG. Only some key art and a smidge of gameplay shown off here, but this team is certainly worth paying attention to, so I'll keep you posted on Graft as more information trickles out over the coming months. That Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection is quite possibly the single best fighting games collection ever assembled, delighting fans on PS5, PC, and Switch, but leaving Xbox fans feeling like that Eric Andre meme. Unclear why exactly the game wasn't shipping on Xbox along with other platforms, but whatever the issue was, it's sort of been resolved. Capcom announced over the weekend that the package will come to Xbox, but it won't be this week like every other platform. It'll instead be sometime next year-ish. Between this and Inotria, I'm not sure what's going on when it comes to the timing of Xbox ports. Speaking of which, Inotria is now coming to Xbox after all. Last week they publicly lamented the fact that Xbox just weren't responding to their emails, and as such they had to indefinitely delay the Xbox version of the game. Well, it's like they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because this week the big man himself, Phil Spencer, intervened to sort this mess out. Developer Jamia Games had this to say, quote, "We would like to officially thank Phil Spencer and his team for reaching out to us so promptly and helping to resolve our situation. We are now working closely with Microsoft, and we hope this collaboration will lead to the game's release on Xbox as soon as possible," end quote. Still no specific date for this one yet, but it is nice to know that Jamia and Xbox were able to hug it out. So what came out last week? Well, Age of Mythology Retold arrived for PC and Xbox. We covered the reviews for that one last week, but TLDR, it's good, a solid remaster, and if you like that old school RTS thing, then you're going to be well serviced by this one. Funny story though, Microsoft are selling an add-on DLC for $6 US, and all it gives you is the classic deity portraits from the original game. They were redone here in the remaster, but if you happen to like the original art style more, Microsoft says that'll be an additional $6, thank you very much. $1 trillion company, by the way. Absolutely embarrassing. Ace Attorney Investigations Collection is a re-release of 2 Ace Attorney spin-offs, one of which was never released outside of Japan until now. That package has done pretty well for itself indeed. 96% very positive on Steam with around 400 reviews counted, and critics seemed very pleased as well, putting it at a mighty 84 on OpenCritic. Checkpoint scored it an 8.5 instead of it, quote, slowly, methodically taking this puzzle apart and revealing the ultimate truth is a thrilling and enthralling experience. The writers put so much effort into shaping these mysteries, and it pays off in spades when you have a realization that makes you gasp out loud in real life. I did that multiple times while completing my journey through these games, which is the highest form of praise I could give them, end quote. Alright, next up it's time for the king, the GOAT, the absolute tippity top of the peakiest peak. I'm talking, of course, about Astro Bot! What a video game! Holy shit! I mean, holy shit, what a video game! If you haven't played it yet, you are probably looking around at all this gushing discourse being like, is this like some weird console wars thing? If you have played it though, you're looking at all that discourse thinking, no, it's not enough. We must all be yelling much louder about how good Astro Bot is. For real, just so there's absolutely no confusion, Astro Bot is a certified all-timer. I said in my review, link below the like button, that Astro Bot feels like jumping into a ball pit as a grown-ass adult. Society does its level best to stop us from experiencing that sort of childish joy, but Astro Bot is purpose-built to deliver that exact feeling again and again. It is so good, and I'm gonna call it right now, I think this will win Game of the Year. I really do. Still a few big releases to go before now and then, but those games are gonna have to bring some serious heat if they are going to top this. I mean, look at the OpenCritic, 95, making it the highest rated game of the year, edging out Shadow of the Erdtree's 94 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's 93. The game is a wash in 9s and 10s like that from IGN, who scored it a 9 and said, quote, a very inventive platformer in its own right, Astro Bot is particularly special for anyone with a place in their heart for PlayStation, end quote, and a perfect 10 from Shaq News, who said, quote, Astro Bot is a charming and cheeky nod to a lot of PlayStation history and a powerful demonstration of PS5 hardware, but more than anything, it's just a ridiculously good video game, end quote. Ridiculous is right. Honestly, if you have a PS5, please just drop whatever you're doing right now and grab a copy. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Releasing into pre-order early access on the very same day as Astro Bot was Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, a Barbenheimer moment if ever there was one, though we did have that Doom Eternal Animal Crossing combo, which was probably a neater parallel. Point is, Space Marine 2 is finally here, and by the Emperor's good graces, it's good. Very, very good, in fact. Currently sits at 80% very positive on Steam, but that score is being dragged down at least a little bit by the fact that Saber promised the ability to group up in teams of 5 for PvP, but right now you're capped at just 3 people, and the other 2 people in your squad are match made in. Critics seem less bothered by that restriction, putting the game at a mighty 85 on OpenCritic. IGN scored it an 8, saying, quote, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is a terrific third-person shooter with a compelling story, loads of weapons that are a blast to use, and a healthy variety of enemies to use them on. It once again borrows many of the ideas from the Gears of War series, but they're good ideas, and Space Marine 2 does a fine job of making them its own, end quote. Most controversial review came from PC Gamer, who scored this one a surprisingly low 6 out of 10. Quote, as a few hours of seeing cool stuff, feeling big, and nerding out before it runs out of steam, Space Marine 2 is a decent bit of fun, but at full price and after 13 years since the original, I think you'd expect a bit more than that, end quote. I do note that that is a very, very unique take on the game, but I actually do agree with some of the review, most notably some of the criticisms about the combat flow, which can be a little sing-songy given how leveraged it is into the executions. I'm still finalizing my thoughts on all that though, playing through both co-op operations and PvP after having finished the campaign over the weekend, aiming to have that review up by the end of the week, so if you'd like to know the minute that review is live, be sure to subscribe and ding that notification bell so I can interrupt whatever you're doing to tell you. So what's coming out this week? Well, this one's a vibe if ever I saw one. Death Sprint 66 is like Mario Kart meets Ghost Runner meets The Running Man. On-foot racers dash through racing tracks, avoiding obstacles and parkouring their way to the finish line. It's actually being developed by the rather prolific Sumo Digital, who typically play the role of support port studio or a porting studio, but this one looks like it's all theirs. It arrives 12th September, exclusive to PC. Holobody is one we've profiled some time back in our Put This On Your Radar segment, and we covered it again during a recent Steam Next Fest. We covered it twice because we like it. The old school PS1 style survival horror game is all the rage right now, and Holobody is very much of that mold. It's promising to be a fairly short and sharp experience that tells the story of a black market smuggler trying to find her missing partner. The setting, the vibes, the fixed camera angles, it's all looking like loving homage to the PS1 greats, and I'm really hoping this one delivers when it arrives exclusive to PC tomorrow. The Lollipop Chainsaw remaster was not on anyone's bingo card until it was announced last year. This is the one that was written by James Gunn and made by, among other people, Suda51. The remaster delivers improved visuals and quality of life improvement, but sadly some changes to the OST due to the wonderful world of music licensing. If you'd like to see what Gunn was working on before Guardians of the Galaxy and Superman, and Suda was working on before all of his crazy shit, then Lollipop Chainsaw Repop arrives for all platforms tomorrow. That Marvel vs. Capcom fighting collection we mentioned earlier in the show arrives tomorrow for all platforms bar Xbox. Difficult to overstate just how stacked this package is, featuring all-timers like Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, and deeper cuts like The Punisher, the latter of which will actually support online play because Capcom clearly give a shit, God bless them. I do suspect that physical editions of this one will be collector's items, so if you want to grab one, be sure to get in there before the resellers do. Another Put This On Your Radar highlight from a while back is Wild Bastards, which arrives for all platforms tomorrow. This one comes from an Aussie-based team who put out the excellent Void Bastards, an irreverent sci-fi roguelike with a wicked sense of humor. This follow-up is still a sci-fi, but it's also a western, so think Firefly, rest in peace, Fox did you so dirty. The studio head for this one, by the way, is a guy named John Che, who was one of the leading people working alongside Ken Levine at Irrational Games when they were still making games like System Shock and Bioshock. Just a lot of reasons to pay attention to this one, including the fact that Edmond is currently playing it and really enjoying it. He recently interviewed a member of the dev team, and a summary of that interview and Edmond's impressions are up on the Patreon, freely available to all, not behind a paywall. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Funko Fusion, man, I'm a little worried about the lack of buzz behind this one. So this is actually a game based on Funko Pops, which sounds terrible because fuck Funko Pops, but the game is actually a sort of IP play in partnership with Universal, and so it has characters and levels based on stuff like Battlestar Galactica and Jaws and Jurassic Park and Knight Rider, and honestly, dozens more stuff, so much that I can't even list it. Most of these are very adult references though, and yet the game is clearly going for that like all ages demographic. Regardless, it's actually made by a team of people who used to make Lego games, which were of course excellent. So there's actually plenty of reasons to be interested in and optimistic about this one. If Astro Bot has left you in the mood for more G-rated IP-based platforming fun, then maybe this will scratch an itch. It's headed to all platforms bar Switch on the 13th. Final Fantasy 16 makes its way to PC on the 17th. Far from my favorite Final Fantasy, but no one can argue with just how hype-inducing those icon showdowns were. Genuine franchise highlights that have seared Final Fantasy 16 into popular memory, whether you liked it or you didn't. This package also includes the 2 DLC drops that PS5 fans had to pay for separately, so PC bros, you're getting a good deal with this one. Man, I really feel like this next one snuck up on us, but Plucky Squire arrives for all platforms on the 17th. What the hell, man? I feel like September just started yesterday. Anyway, Plucky Squire needs almost no introduction at this point, given that you've probably seen the trailers, and you might have seen my preview a little while ago. This is a 2D, 3D adventure that's a playable storybook that comes to life as you leap out of its pages. It's not just a neat gimmick, mind you. It's got some surprisingly solid combat, some great puzzles, and it just oozes charm in a way that few games do. Austin is actually on point for the review of this one, and he's working on it as we speak. Do look forward to his review for this one going live next week. And finally, Jedi Survivor is making the seemingly impossible leap to last-gen consoles. I say seemingly impossible because this game ran like absolute dog shit on both current-gen consoles and PC. A real shame given that the game itself is actually fantastic. If you're at all interested in this one, I beg you please wait for reviews, because I shudder to imagine how this will run on an Xbox One or a PS4. One more title dropping this week, and it looks like a very pleasant, very relaxing time, so put this on your radar. A little while back, a game called Sable arrived, and I really loved it. It didn't have any combat, didn't have much of a storyline, didn't have much of a point to it, other than just like letting you roll around beautiful environments, discovering unique locations, and chatting with the locals as you did so. If it sounds threadbare, it isn't. It was actually a really fulfilling and enriching experience that I still vividly remember to this day. Caravan Sand Witch looks to be doing something very similar. It's got a simple yet arresting art style, it doesn't have any combat, and the focus is on journeying through a barren landscape to discover new locations and people. This one is a little more narrative driven though, as you're searching for your lost sister, but you get the feeling that the goal you're chasing is rather incidental to the whole experience. It's the debut title from a developer called Studio Plain Toast, and it just looks lovely, and I'm really into it, and if you are too, then the best thing you can do is wishlist it, since that actually helps developers out in a big way. I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and boy, we've got a lot to get through this week. Kicking things off as always is Epic, who right now are giving away Football Manager 2024 and Sniper Ghost Warrior contracts. But later this week, both of those will be replaced by something targeting a very different age group, sort of. Rugrats Adventures in Gameland. I say sort of because obviously this is an all ages title, but then again, I think if you know who the Rugrats are, you are easily pushing 40 at this point. Xbox Game Pass got its fortnightly refresh, and it's great if you like things with wheels or jet propulsion. Star Trucker, for example, that's on there. It's a brand new day one release that's meant to be pretty good if you like that whole long-haul truck simulation thing. Speaking of which, Expeditions, a mud runner game, is also on there. That one's actually meant to be excellent. Someone described it to me like Death Stranding, but with wheels, and yeah, I can totally get behind that. Tangentially related is Train Sim World 5, and stretching the wheel metaphor to breaking point is Riders Republic, since that one also includes snowboards and jetpacks. Great game, by the way, for real. If you haven't checked that one out yet, do make the time. I guarantee you, you will be pleasantly surprised. Prime Gaming. Okay, here we go. First of all, can I just say this? Jeff, mate, what is the end game here? For the last like 3 months, Amazon has just been giving away an absolutely absurd number of video games, and it's not like they're on the Amazon launcher platform like Epic is doing. Most of these games, you activate them through Good Old Games or through Epic. So like Amazon are just giving away all this stuff, and I can't understand the upside for them. Jeff Bezos, I know you watch this show each and every week, so please tell me in the comment section what the hell you are doing. Anyway, with that out the way, here's what you can get from Amazon both right now and over the rest of the month. Shadow of Mordor, Lego Lord of the Rings, Lego Indiana Jones, Lego The Hobbit, Shadow of the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, Borderlands 2, Borderlands the Pre-Sequel, Tales from the Borderlands, absolute goat by the way, Greedfall, Moonlighter, Curse to Golf, Thronebreaker, The Falconeer, Kerbal Space Program, Ghost Song, and literally more than a dozen other games that I don't even have time to list here. Honestly, I am genuinely confused with what is going on. Jokes aside, we have legitimately reached out to Amazon to ask them to explain themselves. Why are they doing this? I don't get it. I will let you know if they respond. For our feel-good story for the week, I just want to share this little gem I found while browsing the Twitter. User Jake the Brick spent an entire Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough collecting every single explodable barrel in the entire game, like every single one, just so they could pile them up in one spot and send them sky high. It's like the Trinity test of the modern era. Take a look at the results. Genuinely incredible that the game did not crash when this happened. I don't think Larian gets enough credit for how robust and flexible all their physics stuff is. Not for nothing, but if you'd like to recreate this explosion for yourself, then Jake the Brick has actually hosted their save file on their Twitter thread. Best of luck to your CPU in these difficult times. Alright, ladies and gents, that's the show for the week. I hope you had a good time, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button, smash the subscribe button, and roundhouse kick that notification bell. I'm still playing through Space Marine 2 Operations and PvP, so if you're doing the same, I hope we bump into each other. But whatever it is you're playing, I hope you're having a good time. Thanks as always for stopping by, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, Incogni. So I'll admit, I didn't really know much about the world of personal data until I was approached by this video sponsor, Incogni. I knew that big corporations like Apple and Google had my data, but what I didn't know was that hundreds of other companies that I'd never even heard of also have my data, because it had been on-sold by various data brokers. These companies can sell your data to basically whoever they want, including spammers, or worse, malicious actors looking to use your personal data to commit identity theft. Now, the loophole here is that you can actually technically contact these companies and ask them to delete your data, but not only do you not know who has your data, but there are so many of these data brokers that it would be impossible for you to contact them all. That's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your details, you grant it the required permissions, and after that, Incogni Incogni does all the work for you, sending out hundreds of automated requests to reclaim your data. Take me for example. Incogni has cleared my data from over 66 places that I didn't even know had my data, and had I done all of that back and forth myself, that would have taken me around like 50 hours, which is time that none of us have. I've absolutely noticed a significant reduction in the amount of spam emails and texts that I've been getting, and it just feels nice to know that my data is more secure, since no one wants their personal information being held by some company that you didn't even know existed. It's super easy, super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.